They would just stay quiet if you've got someone who's dominant. And then they take it outside and talk. I called it the bathroom chatter. We put a stop to bathroom chatter because they would go outside, talk to somebody else in the bathroom and not say it in the room. People who are quieter in a room won't speak up, but they're usually the ones whose voice, when they say something, it's quite profound because they thought about it. I will throw in a grenade, if you like. I will throw in a question. Or I will ask, why didn't anybody challenge this? I always get the highest person in the room to be vulnerable first, because if they're vulnerable and open up, the others will. I do it backwards. I get them to be vulnerable and I get them to speak last when it's a decision. People don't like holding each other account for something they haven't done. They know they have to, but they run away. So it's really important to keep things simple, because if you make it too complex, it goes out the window.
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.
Have you ever sat in a meeting where nobody said what they actually thought, and then the real conversation happened 10 minutes later in the corridor? My guest today has a name for that. She calls it the bathroom chatter, and putting a stop to this kind of pattern is where her work as a team coach begins. Tina Blunsdon runs coaching for growth in the UK. She has been coaching for more than 10 years, and a lot of her work with teams builds on Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team model. The model explains teamwork through a pyramid made up of trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and results. But what we get into on today's episode is what the pyramid does not tell you, what actually happens in the room. We get concrete, and Tina shares exercises that she runs to build psychological safety, how she starts an argument on purpose, how she keeps it from turning personal, why she asks the most junior person in the room first when it is about a decision, and the most senior person in the room first when it is about being vulnerable. She shares how she has a team write her own rules for holding each other accountable, how they blue, red, and pause, and her way of getting a team to reflect. So if you have been coaching one-on-one and you're curious what changes if you get a whole team in the room, this one is for you. Let's go. I'm super happy to have you here, Tina.
Thank you, Toby. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah, and out of the many walks of coaching that you're working in, we picked team coaching for today's session.
We did, yes.
Yeah, because you're working with teams, and in order to get into your client's shoes and really imagine how things look like, I would like to start with the question, what do these teams that you work for or work with actually struggle with just before you get hired?
I usually start as doing one-to-ones, to be honest. And through doing the one-to-ones, we look at the culture, the leaders within the team, because I usually work with directors and the board to start with. And out of that, it comes up about how the team is actually working together. And then I get involved with the team workshops and training, because sometimes people just want workshops. They don't want workshops that are going to challenge them. And I challenge them within the workshops, and they're not ready for that in a normal workshop.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I recall actually one other session, a podcast session here, that I was intending to have on team coaching with Niels Cornelissen, a German consultant. And he also told me that he always starts actually talking with people one-on-one before he even meets the team. So apparently that's the case also for you. But in order to understand a bit, how is the situation even before you get hired? I assume there is some sort of issue in the team so that one of the team members or maybe the board or someone, I guess a single person says, okay, maybe we can benefit from coaching. Let's talk to Tina. So before you even arrive and have the first one-on-one, what is a common symptom that basically makes people call you?
There's 2 different ways that they come to me. the problems that they have. One is they're putting a leadership team together and they recognize that they don't know how to be a team because they haven't had it within the company before. And others come to me because they've got issues with a few of their staff members and they say they're struggling as leaders. Can you support them? And that's how they come to me. And there's sort of two ways that they can ask for help, really.
Interesting. So there's basically one batch that is preventive in a way. The people, a team that's only getting started, doesn't yet have any problems, and then says, okay, before we have a rough start, get into problems, let's start early with some team building.
Yeah, more forward thinking, really. Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to upskill their staff to do it because I've got a few new businesses I'm working with, and it's all come to me through word of mouth.
And how large are these companies and also the teams usually?
Oh gosh, that varies. My smallest team that I work with is 12, and the largest I've worked with is a multinational company.
Okay, okay. And the people, the group that actually end up talking to you, how big are those teams?
So if it's just a team, I usually say no more than 9 because I think more than 9 is not effective. But then I do individuals as well. I'm not just with the team, but the team leaders is usually around, the largest is 9 and the smallest is 3.
Okay, so 3 to 9, and those come from companies, from organizations that are from startup SME to multinational.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. And yeah, maybe let's look a bit at the, not at the preemptive one, but at the problem. Like you said, okay, they struggle with some of their leaders. How does that struggle usually look like?
So the first thing I always do is like a disc assessment because I get them to understand each other, themselves first, and then each other. And I always do that first. Before I work with any team, I do a disc assessment because once they understand how they approach topics and talking to each other, they can then adapt themselves a little bit to the other person. So they understand the other person, they also understand themselves. And I think that is the first stepping stone about how do we communicate? What is good for one person is not always good for another. So we do that first, and then we then start working with the team because it's all around communication that they struggle.
Okay. Yeah, and the disc assessment, so for anyone who has not heard of it, and I doubt that's many people, is a personality assessment
That's right.
that basically helps the teams on the one hand to get some self-awareness about their preferences, about their behavior, and also a common language in which they can talk about these tendencies, these behaviors.
Yeah.
I actually have an episode, I think it was with Rule Shard here on the podcast also, where we do a demo coaching with DISC. So if you
Yeah.
are curious to look into that, I can recommend that episode.
Yeah. DISC is my favorite to use because it's non-judgmental. It just explains it really well. And I think a lot of my clients prefer that to other ones that they've had within their company before me.
So I guess that is one differentiator maybe that gets you called for a team coaching versus a one-on-one leadership coaching, or how is that?
Quite often, if they're struggling as a team at the top, it filters through. They do have problems with their own departments as well because it comes back to their communication, how they communicate with their teams as well. So I usually start at the top and then they ask me to work with departments as well. So it doesn't start there because quite often, say the industry I'm in is to do with is construction. So you have a lot of mechanical and electrical departments and they don't work together for some strange reason, even if it's design or actually install. So I help them work together as well. So there's all different types of teams that need help.
Okay, interesting. So that means when you get hired, oftentimes you don't only work with the one leadership team, but then you
No.
also work with their respective teams.
Yeah, after. Yeah, once they understand what it can do, because they need to see it to believe it. And then get asked then to work with different teams within the company, not just at the top.
Okay. And what I learned when we spoke earlier is that you work with or your approach is informed, let's say, by the 5 dysfunctions of a team methodology. What have you found in your practice makes this model so useful?
It's getting people talking, because once they start talking and opening up, they can build trust, which is the fundamental aspect, because they won't be vulnerable and open if they don't trust each other, and they start to understand each other. And once they open up and understand each other more, then you can work on the other functions of a team, which is conflict, commitment, accountability, and then leading to the results that they all should be working to the common goal.
Okay. Yeah, maybe let's just get started by actually looking a bit at that model. So, can I ask you to explain it a bit to us? And I'll also put it here on the screen for everyone who's not only listening but also watching.
Okay, so as I said, to start with is trust. Without having true trust with your team that you're working with, you cannot go to the other parts of the model, because you've got to break down barriers. People have got to be open and honest to each other. They will just stay quiet if you've got someone who's dominant, and then they take it outside and talk. I called it with one company the bathroom chatter. We put a stop to bathroom chatter because they would go outside, talk to somebody else in the bathroom and not say it in the room. So we had to get them to understand it's okay to be open in this safe environment, but it's making the environment safe in the beginning, which then, you can go on to conflict. You can start challenging each other. You can't challenge without having trust that you're not going to get shouted down or talked over. And when you can have conflict, you can have real good discussions, not bullying, not banter, but discussions about a particular topic. And when you unpick that topic, it's like peeling an onion then. You can look at it and then you can commit to it. Because if you commit to something, you then can have buy-in from everybody. If you don't get the buy-in, then you can't hold people to account. That's the other area that people really struggle with, is holding someone else to account, because it's like that conflict again, the emotional conflict. Like, why didn't you do this? You said you were going to. They just leave it. They don't know how to. So it's about showing people how to have healthy conflict, and then they all understand. Then they're working to the common goal. They're all there to get the same results. They've all bought in. They've put a date on something, and they know who's owning it, and then you'll get the results you're looking for.
Okay, so at the foundation of everything is trust. And if we want to
Trust.
phrase it as a dysfunction, then it is a lack of trust.
Lack of trust,
And
yes.
and with trust, we don't necessarily mean, okay, I can rely on this guy that he gets his stuff done, but it's more like this psychological safety kind of trust. I dare to speak up in this group. Also, if I'm not happy with something, I dare to ask the quote unquote stupid question. So this kind of trust is the foundation that allows us then to go to the next level of the pyramid and have constructive conflict in a way.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Definitely. It has to be a safe place that you can actually say things without the fear of being bullied or shouted down, which can happen in teams, because the people who are quieter in a room won't speak up because they can be put down or by the dominant characters. But they're usually the ones whose voice, when they say something, it's quite profound because they thought about it, rather than the other ones who talk all the time. They just don't always think and process what they're saying. So when they understand each other and they understand how each other communicates, if you've got somebody who's leading that team really well, they can bring out the best of everybody as well and build that trust element, which I think is really important.
Yeah, so this model is based on a book by Patrick Lencioni. It's a book from 2002, so I think also way before this famous Google study, the Aristotle project, where they came up with this concept of psychological safety. But in essence, this guy already said the same kind of thing 10, 12 years earlier. And Yeah, how did this model become so central to your work? If I understood you correctly, it's kind of the anchor point of your approach with teams. What makes it so powerful in your eyes?
Well, I was working with quite a large company and they were really struggling with the team element. And my husband actually said to me, I think this would be really good for you to listen to. And when I listened to it, I thought, oh my goodness, that's exactly what they're struggling with. It was trust. And I took it to the MD and I said, I think this book would really help the team if I did a workshop on it. And then all the directors read it, they agreed, and then it went from there. And then I realized the power in the work that can be done around it, not just taking the model as it is, but actually diving deeper and getting people to open up and look at things differently. So that's where I sort of branched more with it, not just with the model. And I just went deeper with it, really. And I use it all the time now.
Okay, so you even have your clients read the book. How does it help you if they read it?
But they can understand what we're trying to build, what I'm directing them towards. Because it is written as a story, and predominantly my work is in construction, they really get it. And that's the feedback I get is we get it because we can see ourselves around that boardroom table. We can see the characters that they're talking about within our own team and how people approach things. And then they can actually see how it could work with theirs and why are these elements really important.
Okay. Yeah, so the book is a really easy read, right? It's quite short overall, and I would say 70-80% of the book is a story about a dysfunctional team of, I would say, high functioning individuals who
Definitely,
simply
yes.
cannot talk to each other and don't function as a team. And then it's the story of, I think in this case, it's not an external coach, but basically the
No.
newly hired MD,
Yes,
managing
that's right.
director, who takes a coaching approach to rebuilding that team, right? And only in the very
Yeah.
end of the book, there's a brief explainer on the model, but it's very experiential, visual in a way,
Yeah, you can
how
picture
this
it, can't
works.
you? Yeah. You can be hard. And I think having that story of seeing how she brought it in and the thoughts behind what she was doing, because it explains the reasoning behind it as someone's narrating her thoughts, it helps you understand as well. That's the feedback I've got from my clients as well, that they get it more because it is in the story. And she's come from a completely different industry to what she is working with that team. So it doesn't matter what your background is, it's the principle around it that works.
Yeah. Cool. Then let's spend the rest of this episode to really unpack that. And you said, okay, you work with this pyramid model and you actually have your clients, the teams, read the book or familiarize themselves with the model. And then let's focus on the foundation of this pyramid, the trust, and then from the trust arising the ability to have constructive conflict. What exactly is it that you as a team coach do to establish that kind of trust?
Well, in my workshop, I always start, as I said, with the DISC assessment. Then I get them opening up, doing something like, say, 2 truths and a lie. And then people have to guess what is the lie or what are the truths. That's really quite good fun because people are amazed when they learn something new. Other things I get them to do is one challenge or something that's been really successful through their childhood that they've taken with them, or something that's happened in their adulthood that shaped them. So I get them saying something really personal. Even I've done this with a team of 3 who've worked together for 10 years and they still learn about each other that they didn't know. They all said to me in the beginning, "Oh, we know everything about each other." And they walked out and saying, "I didn't know that." So that really gets them understanding the person more so in a deeper level than just the role they do and the superficial of what you're like at work. So it is about getting them to open up, talk more. And once you open up, you're more vulnerable. And then you can start working on what trust looks like. So my next bit is looking at what do you need as a team to trust each other, to talk, to open up, to be vulnerable. And then I go around the room and ask them individually what it is that they need to be able to do this. Sometimes it's writing things down on notes because they don't always like talking, and then they put them up on the window. And then we look at them all. So it's more anonymous, if you like, and we just pick out the topics and then we discuss those as well to break down the barriers of why they're not trusting each other, as in a sense, I can be open and honest and have a discussion without fear of conflict. They're fearful even to open up.
Okay. So that kind of gives us 3 steps, if I'm trying to paraphrase a bit. You start with the disc assessment. That, I guess, already opens up the room to talk about myself, right? I get
Yeah.
to reflect alongside that report about my own preferences. You do that in the group also, so everybody gets to hear
Yes.
the others?
That's right. What I like doing is putting the bar charts, because then there's a bar chart and it's so visual. I put them all around the room and they have to guess who is who. That's a
Nice.
really good one. And not many are that right. They're quite surprised. And then they also have to say sort of one area that they feel that is important for them out of communication, what they like and what they don't like. So they work in pairs with that as well, and then they swap around so they can actually say things that they like when they're communicated with and things that they prefer not to. So they actually have a better understanding of how each other communicates as well.
I see. And then in the next step, you said, okay, you're doing kind of team building exercises like the I tell 2 truths about myself and 1 lie, oftentimes like non-work related. So it's actually a good fun exercise, right?
Yes, yeah.
And I'm wondering, and I think that also comes up in the story of the book actually, do you get resistance, especially in this step, like especially when the company is struggling? Do you get this concern from the team members? Look, we don't have time for these child games in a way, or I need to rather get some work done rather than talking about my childhood kind of stuff. Do you get these concerns? And if yes, how do you respond?
Oh, that's a good question. If I ever had that. I had one team where from different departments and they wanted them all to work together. Now, they were quite challenging to start with. I had been working with the company a long time, so I knew what their barriers were. But I started with the disc assessment, and because I got them talking, they relaxed. And when they relaxed, I could then move on to the next step. And then we did something humorous to start with. Then I eased them into it. So you have to work with the audience that you've got and really suss them out very quickly. If I need to bring any other tasks in, active listening, that's a really good one to bring in. So they have a group of 3 people. One person has music playing in their ears. One person talks about themselves, any topic that they want to for 2 minutes, and the other one is an observer. And that's really good because then they feed back to each other what they've heard, what they missed. So again, it's like an icebreaker, but they're learning about each other as well. Who can actually listen? Who uses their voice in the head all the time instead of listening? And that's another good one to do some sort of breaking down those barriers so they'll talk more. So I think once you do all those sort of things, you can then go into deeper because they're more relaxed and open.
Yeah, and I can imagine this exercise of one person watching the other person speak while they don't hear them. That's also great to attune people to each other and get them to pay attention, actually. Kind of, it builds that empathy like, okay, what might be going on in this other guy or girl?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely, because they have to look at their body language, see if they can get their tone of voice, their facial expressions, because it isn't about the words you say, is the words you don't voice are important, your body language and the signals that you're getting off. And the people using the headphones, I've realized that they actually start looking for that more. And the feedback they given me was they had to get in tune with the person to actually understand everything they were saying. And it really makes them think when they're talking to people that they've got to look at the whole person, not just the words they're saying.
Yeah, amazing. And then this other aspect that you mentioned earlier, I also would like to highlight that if people talk about their childhood or about like these non-work related truths and lies, what you said basically is it has the impact of bringing the whole person to work. Like not only your work personality in a way that the others might already know pretty well, but kind of you I would say integrate yourself and show yourself as a human being also. And I think that can be
Mm.
quite powerful when it comes to this
Yeah.
trust and psychological safety.
Yeah, you're more vulnerable, aren't you? And when you find something out about the human, the real person, it can build bridges. I've had that. And I think it says that, not sure if it's in that book, but if you understand someone more as a personal, in-depth way, it also builds those bridges, which really helps. Because people don't know the challenges you've been through in life. And then they can see, okay, perhaps that's why you react in that way when I do something. And that really helps understanding.
Yeah. Okay, and now we spend a lot of time building trust. And if we now move up the pyramid one level, we end up with conflict. What makes conflict such a positive thing, actually, in this context?
Yeah, is that they say, isn't it? You need healthy conflict. And what I love about the conflict stage is watching the team actually navigate that and start saying things to each other. But they have to remember it can't be in abusive ways. So we set the ground rules, if you like, with them. So part of the task I set them is, what are you missing to be able to have healthy conflict? Because that's what you want a team to have, rather than the barriers there about discussing it. And they also come to an agreement of what they will do to be able to have the conflict, be quiet, and let someone else speak. One team I know of, a very big corporation, the MD actually had a baton for relay racing, and he used that as a signal. It's our turn to speak, because they all wanted to talk and no one was listening. So no one could actually ask questions to be able to have any conflict. And that really helped them as an object to think, hang on a minute, I've got to be quiet and start listening. And then when the baton went on the table, they could ask questions, because they were really poor at listening. And that really helped them turn around to be able to have those in-depth questions. The other thing I teach people is the 5 whys. So you don't just ask why or ask a question once, you then ask another question on top of that, and then another one, just to really get in depth of what someone's talking about. Because quite a lot of the time people ask one question, usually a closed question, the yes or no. Do you want this or do you want that? Yes or no. They don't ask why. How would that benefit us? What difference would it make? And I think once you understand how to question people more, you can have more healthy conflict. You've also got to have someone in the room who can bring it back. If it's getting out of hand, you have to have someone to bring it back to healthy conflict, because it can get personal and it's not meant to be. It's meant to be about a topic, not the person.
And what is your role as a coach in this process? How do you spark this kind of conflict and how do you keep it constructive?
When I see something that could be discussed more, because I understand their industry by now, I will throw in a grenade, if you like. I will throw in a question, or I will ask, why didn't anybody challenge this? And then we can go to a vote as well, like between 1 and 99. How important is this question to you, or this topic to you, or whatever it has been discussed? So then they all have a vote, but they also have to write down why, and then they have to say why they're at that number. And that gets them talking. That helps them start having that healthy conflict as a team, because I show them different ways to be able to have that. You can do fist of 5 as well, and they all vote with their fingers. So there's different ways, quick ways of doing it. And a lot of them do use that as well, if they feel that the further discussion needs to have, and this conflict needs to be resolved, really. So there's different ways of doing it.
So, in a way, you equip them with tools, you could say. I mean, you mentioned the facilitation tool, the physical token for question asking earlier. And now what you are saying is, in order to spark the conflict, it is that you you put the finger on the elephant in the room in a way, if you sense there might be one. And then you use a scaling question, like on a scale of 1 to 10, or you said with the fingers, I guess
Yeah,
0 to
fist of
5.
5. Yeah.
How relevant is this to you? Or should we stay here?
Yes. Yeah. Because they still need to be in control of it. The other things I've done as well, I had one team where there was 4 on teams and 4 in the room. And one of the people in the room really didn't like something that was said, but he didn't use any words. He used his body language. And it was so obvious, but nobody else in the room would say anything. So I paused it and I asked that person to explain what was going on for him in that moment. Why was he using those expressions? Because he wouldn't say it and the room wouldn't question him. And that was really good because after that session, none of them did it on Teams. They all came into the meeting because they realized how important it was to actually see each other for them as a team, because they weren't really looking at each other. They were just talking. So even if you're on Teams, it's really important you're actually seeing the other people in the room one way or another.
Yeah, because those elephants, they come in the form of facial expressions in a way.
Yeah, not just
And
voiced.
yeah, and I think that other bit you just mentioned is also a very interesting one, because this example of maybe somebody rolling their eyes and the other people not reacting to it, even though they see it, that might also be a symptom in a way of this lack of psychological safety, because they apparently want to avoid the conflict. They don't dare to speak up and ask, okay, what's going on? What do you feel right now?
Yes.
So that is also something that you need to, that you help them with,
Yeah, to pick up on body language. Yeah, and it's that's why I do that active listening sort of workshop in the workshop, the one with the headphones and the music, because they have to focus on body language. And I think that starts the process of them noticing each other and understanding we've got to look at body language all the way through this, because in those meetings, if you're not picking up on those subtleties, you're missing masses. And that's when they go outside and complain. They take it out of the room instead of talking about it in the room where you can deal with it. If you've got someone facilitating that meeting, they can pick it up.
Yeah. So that goes back in a way to that bathroom chatter that you mentioned in the very beginning. People talk about each other, not with each other.
And that's so common in teams when I first start working with them. And they all say, but we had a discussion after. And I say, why didn't you bring it up in the meeting? And then we unpick their barriers. And often it's their lack of self-confidence. The environment will allow it, but they haven't got the confidence to say it. So we then deal with that. That's why one-on-one coaching with teams is really beneficial as well.
Okay, so if we think back of our pyramid, and let me just put it on screen again for a minute, we now establish trust, and that trust enables us to have conflicts, to bring up the elephants in the room, and constructively solve the actual issues that get a 5 that we think are relevant as a team. I think that's quite intuitive, like this connection of trust and then conflict. How do we get from this conflict to commitment? And I guess what we mean here is commitment towards a decision. How is that connection, and how does it look like in practice in the team building room?
So the team, say if you're in a board and you've got directors or a director of different departments, their main team should be that board, not their own. Their own comes second, the whole of the company comes first. So when they've had that open discussion about why the money's got to go into that particular department, they are then all on board. They've had their say. They may not always agree 100%, which isn't always the case, but they agree to go behind it. And when they go behind it, they are committed to it. So then it's about then setting a date of what actions are going to be done, who's going to be doing it, when they're going to feed back. All that's written down and captured in that meeting. Then they have all had an opportunity to have a voice, be listened to, which is more important, and commit to something, and they all agree. So you have to have it out at that time. Someone may need to help facilitate that to get to that point, but without committing with it, you can't go on to the next stage.
Okay, that means in a way, what's happening is by having this conflict, we make sure that in the process of the conflict, everyone gets heard. And then people don't necessarily have to agree with each other, or we don't strive for consensus, but we strive for all voice being heard and then making a decision. And then what counts is actually committing to this decision that we made as a team, even though my personal opinion would be going against it previously. But
yeah, but you have a better understanding of the why. Everyone needs to understand why are we committing to this? And they may have said, oh yeah, but I would like, I know, another 20 laptops, but I understand why the mechanical team need more people because they're obviously bringing more revenue in. So it's about unpicking the actual reason why it needs funding and then everyone getting behind that decision. Because once that team's more effective and bringing in more revenue, they can then put the money into other areas. That's just as an example.
in the end, it's all about the results that we as a company, so as the biggest possible team, the biggest possible system, achieve.
Because if you're only looking after yourself, you're not looking after the company. And it's the company that you need to survive and grow. So then each of your areas are looked after. So it always has to start at the top. I had this with a leadership team. It was quite a big one, actually, to start with. I think there was 10 in it. And I went around the table and asked them, which is your number one team? I think I seen them about 4 times as a team, but I all knew them individually. And they all said their own. So I explained why it's important that team should be their number one and how to develop that. I asked them again, and 6 months later, they all said that team was their number one because they worked together. They built it. They built up the trust. They built up the sort of how to have conflict and how to get results. And they started working together. And I couldn't believe the shift in them as a team. And they understood what that meant because then they all benefited. They all supported each other. They all helped each other. I thought I was going to have a job with them, but they got there.
And that makes sense, I believe. And now that we understand the mechanics of the team dynamics and why commitment and the attention to results is so important, let's ask again, what is your role as a coach? How do you facilitate this process of getting to that commitment, even though there is disagreement about how things should be done? How do you make sure that in the end, if you are the facilitator of this process, get everybody rallied around this one decision that has been taken?
Well, I feed back what I see. I ask the questions. And also is that you can do different things as well. You can have a vote who's on board with this. And if they get no's, then we look at why until they've solved it. And then they all get committed. And if it's someone really digs in, they have to have a real good reason as to why it wouldn't work. And then sometimes they're valid and it can change a whole room's decision. And someone may have had an experience that caused it to be a problem and they haven't been able to voice it before. But with me facilitating these meetings, the ones that I do attend before they can run their own, I show them how to do it and how to ask those challenging questions. And then afterwards, they can start doing it themselves. So I have to show them how it's done because they don't always know how to do it themselves. So as a facilitator, it's teaching them how to ask those questions.
And in a way, the first thing you said, I think, is you make this process transparent. So you show them, look, maybe usually the decision is taken by just this one guy who, I don't know, maybe is the managing director or just the loudest guy or girl in the room, basically says what they think should be done, and then the rest kind of avoids voicing their opinion. But you basically make sure that everyone's opinion is heard and also help the process of having everyone understand the reasoning behind these opinions.
Yeah, if you don't understand the why, people don't get behind. And I usually ask the sort of the top person to go last. I usually ask other people with lower levels their thoughts first, because otherwise they do follow either the loudest speaker or the most dominant person or the highest ranking. So I always ask them first, but I always get the highest person in the room to be vulnerable first, because if they're vulnerable and open up, the others will. I do it backwards. I get them to be vulnerable and I get them to speak last when it's a decision. And that's where you can facilitate it as well.
Yeah. And that goes back to our whole psychological safety trust point, right? That we assume there is maybe not 100% psychological safety. And that's why we want people who would otherwise not voice their opinion or just fall in line, even though they don't actually agree. You say those people should speak first. But when it's about being vulnerable and revealing something about myself, saying what I'm not sure about, you ask the top people first. So they kind of role model this behavior and establish, okay, it's okay to be uncertain, it's okay to be vulnerable here.
That's right. I usually do tell them that's what I'm going to do beforehand. So they're aware, because you can't just set them up to fail themselves. They are aware that's what I'm going to do, which helps, because otherwise they try and get their say in.
Yeah.
So it's about helping the team open up and be vulnerable, and also when to be quiet themselves and let others speak, because they're not always used to doing that, because people expect of them. You're the head. What do you want? We'll go with what you say. But they've brought me in to help change, and they have to learn how to start trusting this change process, and they have to show it themselves first before others will commit to it as well.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Just for the sake of completeness also and really understanding this, I think we have this one part of the pyramid left, the avoidance of accountability as one dysfunction. What's that all about?
People don't like holding each other account for something they haven't done. It's usually fear of saying it, how to start that conversation. They know they have to, but they run away. So it's like the freeze, fight, or flight, the modes where people get into, and they don't know how to cope with it. So when somebody hasn't done something in the training, I get them to say, okay, so how would you like to approach this as a team? Who sort of buying in to this? How are you going to hold each other to account? So I get them leading how they're going to do it. And I listen to what they're saying and how they think it can work, because accountability has to come from them, because I can ask them to hold them account, but they have to understand how to do it. So it's about getting them to write down what behaviors they expect from the team. And that is, if so, one of the things is, if we know we're not going to do something by a certain time, at least communicate it with the others. Don't wait to the day of the meeting, because that doesn't show respect either. So it's about respecting each other, communicating with each other, asking for help. Because one part of trust is, if you're vulnerable enough, you can ask for help or say, I'm really struggling to get this done prior. So they set the ground rules themselves of what they think accountability is, how they're going to hold each other to account, and what they're going to do if someone isn't held to account. So I get them to actually write it down. I type it all up, and then I hand a copy to them, or I email it all out to them of what they put in as rules, because you've got to be able to do that vital part. Otherwise, there's no point going through all the rest. Because if you don't hold each other to account that something they haven't done, they just won't do it. And then it all goes pear-shaped. And I find that is the biggest one in a team. And that's the first one to slip back, holding each other to account if they haven't done something as well.
And I guess, isn't that also a who question in a way? So when I hear accountability, I also think of a tool like the accountability matrix, where we write down what are the different areas that we are working in and who is accountable for which area. And that doesn't mean they have to do everything, right? We're not
No,
talking
they can
about
delegate.
responsibility. We're talking about who is in the end accountable for what.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, because especially that level, they're not going to go away and do all the doing, but they have to make sure it's done. If it's just as simply as, oh, I've forgotten, I didn't do it, then they have to explain it to their team, and that's embarrassing. So they're less likely to make that mistake again, and they're more likely to either ask for help or do it, because they have to answer to their peers. And people don't like having to answer. But if you don't get this accountability rules in place and what you're going to do, you can't hold them to account.
And do you have certain tools or methods, exercises that you use to shape and get clarity into this accountability question?
Usually it's just by getting them talking it through. What does it look like for them? Because every team I've worked with think differently, and they have different needs. So it is them leading this more so than me, really. I don't have a particular tool to use. I just ask them, what do you need? what does it look like, and how you're going to implement this and make sure it's done. And when they talk it through as a team, they all agree on it. And then that's why I write it down and send it to them all, as you've all bought into it. And you can get them signing it as well, because they've agreed to it. And if they sign something, it's more official.
Okay. So in the end, for you, it's about getting everything on the table and then having them agree that this is all and who is who in a way.
Yeah.
So you don't do any. So I heard of tools like the RACI matrix or accountability matrix, delegation poker, these kinds of things. That's
Not in that workshop. I work
no.
with those on individual. By signing up to something and agreeing it after you've been through all the rest is, in my experience, is usually enough.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Keep it simple.
yeah, 'cause you need a clear message, don't you?
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I think now we really unpacked what makes a effective team focused on results and trusting each other to have conflict, commit around decisions, and hold each other accountable. Is there anything that we've missed out, like one aspect in this entire journey of this team coaching process that we didn't pay attention to?
I think it's the results themselves, because everybody needs to understand what they're aiming for. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we all going through this process? Is the results is whatever it is that they need to work towards, and that shifts every time. And some people have an agenda which is so long. They cannot do this for every single thing. They can't have results for everything. So it's looking at the fundamental thing that they want to work on and breaking it down. So I also do that, look at their agenda as well and say, okay, so which is the most important thing that you really need as a team to be working on, and get them to focus on that. So it's like having key objectives and then breaking that down. So it is the understanding why. What is it we're doing? Why are we doing it? What does it look like? How do we know we fit it? And what does that look like going forwards? And then it's about then looking back, having that pause. So it's like the blue, red, and pause. So the blue is the meeting, the red is the doing, and then you have a pause and they reflect on what the outcome was. Does it meet what we decided in the beginning? Why we were going all through this? And is it right, the results? And if it is, they move on to the next one. If it's not, why didn't it work? So I
The
help them
blue
with
is the
that side
meeting,
as
the
well.
red is the doing, and then we
Yeah,
pause.
pause.
Can you explain that more? Why is the blue the meeting and the red the
Blue
doing?
is the thinking. The blue is the discussion. The blue is having time to talk and think. Then you go away and put it all into action. And then you pause and reflect as a team. Was it successful? Why wasn't it successful? And then you regroup, make another decision, and then you move forward. But you have to have that process.
Yeah. So in a way, that is maybe what we would call in the agile IT world. It's a process of having a retrospective. And in the construction industry that you're working in, you work with this kind
Well,
of
no, that's
simpler
what
language.
I bought that in. I read it somewhere and it really works. So
Nice.
So it's easy for everyone because it's a visual, and they can see, they think of blue and they think of red, and then they remember the pause, because it's really important to keep things simple, because I do so much with people. They have to have it simple to understand and to remember to do. If you make it too complex, it goes out the window.
How does that goal setting look like in the facilitation room?
That's a different session on about how you goal set and how you deal with things, because a lot of the companies have a list as long as your arm and they're never going to get it done. So I help them to look at what's really priority, what's their top 3. And then out of that, they look at the top 1 they want to do first. And we break that down into smaller chunks. And then teams then go away and break it down even smaller. So that's a different session, really. And the vast of it diminishes at each team. So you start with something big here, a whole cakey, and they take chunks out, don't they, each department? And then you look at it bite size then with each one.
Okay. And I imagine this kind of goal setting session that happens after we are through all the vulnerability, get to know, psychological safety work that we discussed earlier.
It depends on the company, really, in what I've been doing with them. Sometimes they needed that sooner, so they understand goal setting. And sometimes it's they have teamwork first, and then we go on to the strategy side of things.
This might also be doing it differently might also be a nice remedy to my earlier concern of having people say, oh, I don't want to waste my time with childhood stories.
I've never had that, though. People put those barriers up about talking, because most people like to talk about themselves when they have their 2 minutes of time, because they have to be comfortable first. When you go into icebreaker, everybody hates icebreakers. So I do something that they're moving around and talking in pairs. They're not talking in front of the whole group. So do a few individual things like pairs or drawing on their backs, and they have to copy. And I think once you break that down, because going around a room saying your name and where you've come from and what you've done, everybody hates. And that's the barriers. I don't do it like that because it doesn't help.
Yeah. Yeah, I also discussed that very recently, actually, with Mehdi, another facilitator who also went into why, like many of these classic icebreakers, they rather make people feel uncomfortable and not help them open up. Yeah,
that's right.
Okay, great. So if, let's say, I'm an aspiring coach, I so far mainly did one-on-one coaching, and now I want to get started with this whole team coaching thing. Where do you recommend I get started?
Oh, gosh. Is that started as in talking to people or understanding yourself? Which way are you thinking?
What do you think is
That's me?
first?
Okay. So first of all, and it is about where's your own thoughts on this? Because you have to obviously facilitate it. You can't just read a book and then go and deliver it, in my opinion, anyway. So it's like, what are the challenges that your company you're working with are having it? Reading the book, taking notes from it, and then doing your own workshop around it and putting it together. And talking to the powers that be who give you permission about what it is it could offer. Where could the improvements be? What is the difference if you start making people work together, open up and talk? And how can it benefit the business? Because that's what they want to know at the end of the day. Why am I investing in this? What am I going to get back? So it is about showing where behavior change and communication is more effective. People understanding each other, working more collaboratively, they can make better informed decisions, which in the end gives better results, which in the end gives you better finances. So it's about helping them understand why these sort of workshops really are beneficial. But you have to understand that yourself first. We have to work with them, in my opinion. What I've done is I work with them for a while, get a really good picture, then I put it to them and say, I think this would really benefit the company because I can see this and this.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. And where, Tina, can we find you, your work, and coaching for growth?
Well, I don't have a website or anything. The only advertising, because mine's all been word of mouth, and like I've just got my 10th anniversary, from starting Coaching for Growth, and I've never advertised. So you can find me on LinkedIn under Tina Blunsdon and Coaching for Growth, and you can find me on there. So I've been very fortunate. Word of mouth has done it for me. And as I said, 10 years I've been coaching for. Just celebrated my anniversary, which has been nice.
Oh, yeah, that's super impressive. So you're doing this since 10 years for a living,
Yeah,
and
for
you
a
don't
living.
even have a website.
And I've never had a website. No.
That's so cool, because I think many aspiring coaches, they say, okay, I cannot yet get started. I don't even have a website. And I can sympathize with this idea, but I think oftentimes it is also procrastination, kind of avoiding to get started. And I think, your story here is a living proof that.
Yeah. I started off because my previous job was working in the field of autism. I used to run a team across college. And then I decided I was going to do my own coaching. And through the training of Animas, where I trained with them, I got a couple of clients. And because my background's in education, I was asked to go into my husband's company to support someone who's having challenges with their son. And I helped them and navigated the whole system. And then I was asked then to support one of his team as who's apprentice. So I started off doing mentoring really. And then other people started realizing I was mentoring apprentices. And then when they asked me to go into their company, I said, what about some of your leaders? Do you want some work done with them? And it just grown and grown. And now predominantly I work with boards and directors and leaders. I don't do much mentoring anymore. And it's evolved over time. And I think you have to prepare to put yourself out there. One of my biggest clients I've had for 9 years, I met at a function and I was listening to them, listened to all their woes about their company. He eventually asked me, what do I do? And I just said, do you think that would be a benefit to your company? And he said, yes. He wasn't a director at that time. It took 9 months, but I've been with them for nine years. And I still see their staff, not as often, but they bring me different types of clients for different reasons. You just don't know where it goes.
Yeah, that's such a cool story because what it reminds me of now is the beginning of our conversation and the entire theme in the 5 dysfunctions of a team. The coach-like leader, Catherine, she also has a teaching background, I think, originally.
Okay.
So that's such a nice parallel.
She does, doesn't she? Yeah, that's true.
I'm not surprised
Yeah.
this methodology became your anchor, actually.
Yes, that connection.
Fate. Yeah. Okay, thanks so much, Tina. This was super fun and insightful, and I think also really dense and rich. Yeah,
It
thank
was
you.
my pleasure. I hope it helps. And even if just one person gets something from it, it's worth doing, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. We're working on making it more than one, but yeah, it's
I
also
hope
a
so.
work in progress. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
This was my conversation with Tina Blunsdon. And the ending of the conversation really reminded me of the early episodes of this podcast when we talked about the making of a coach, how people turned their passion into profession. So if you're curious about stories like the ones that Tina gave a bit of an insight towards the end, then just scroll all the way back to the beginning of these podcasts. If you're curious to dig into what we've discussed today, then of course you will find the link to Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, in the show notes, just as well as the references to Tina's online profile. And if you're looking for exercises to get teams talking about more than work, then of course I can also recommend picture cards. The picture cards we built at MetaFox, something for people to react to so they can feel comfortable while sharing and open up a little faster. Try them for free on metafox.online or find physical card sets at metafox.eu. If this was useful, share this episode with a friend, and wherever you listen to, I'm also grateful if you hit subscribe. If you have feedback, text me on LinkedIn or on Tobias at metafox.eu. And with this, I say all the best on your journey towards becoming an impactful coach. See you back here in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
I'll make it as a coach, like the spark inside. Empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow. Changing lives with every story I know.